Ed, thank you so much for joining me on the Casual Birder podcast. It's wonderful to have you here.
My pleasure. One podcaster to another. That's good.
So, you host the Bird Banter podcast, and your podcast was one of the first that I saw when I started my show many years ago. You have fantastic conversational style with your podcast. Tell me a little bit about how you got into birding so that we know your birding background. And then I'd like to ask you some things about your podcast.
Absolutely. As birders go, I got kind of a late start to birding. It was a long time ago. I was maybe 30 or 31, something like that, quite a while ago. And I had really never even contemplated birding. But my wife was an on again, off again birder, and she was off again during our first part of our time together. And we took a visit my family, who my mom and dad were snowbirds from Maine. They went to Florida. And I think it was around maybe Thanksgiving or Christmas. I don't remember. Probably Thanksgiving, I'm guessing. We went down to visit them in Florida, and it made kind of a vacation out of it. We decided we'd go to Key West first and have a little time to ourselves, and then drive up from Key West to visit my folks on the Gulf Coast of Florida. And we're driving from Key West to Hudson, Florida, which is a little obscure little town on the Gulf Coast of Florida. And we had 2 days to get there. It was maybe a 6-hour drive. So we're just moseying along, and we're going to stop somewhere for the night. And Kay said, "Can we go to the Everglades?" And we'd already stopped to see God knows how many alligators everywhere, and I'm thinking, like, the Everglades? Who wants to go to the Everglades? But I said, "Sure, we can go to the Everglades." She said, "Well, I'm a bird watcher, and I've always wanted to go to the Everglades." I said, "You're a bird watcher?" She said, "Yeah, I brought my binoculars and my field guide with me. We're in Florida." I said, "Okay, sounds good." So we stopped into the ranger station just as we entered the Everglades in Florida. It was before all the hurricanes. Had this fabulous ranger station and palm trees all around it and a little swamp nearby. It was just a beautiful little spot. And we go in to talk to the rangers. Kay was very, very outgoing. We go in to talk to the rangers, and she said, "Where can I find a pileated woodpecker?" And he said, "You don't hear them?" And we step outside the door, and there are like four pileated woodpeckers just destroying these palm trees. They're
Oh,
big,
wow.
big woodpeckers. And they just bam, 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 bam on these palm trees. And I go like, "Well, that's pretty cool." And I had remembered seeing pileated woodpeckers when I was a child in Maine, but just thought they were the Woody the woodpecker, didn't think anything of it. And so I said, and we saw two or three other good species right there in the parking lot, and said, "This could be fun. I want a field guide too." And so we walked back into the ranger station. They have a little bookstore there, and Peterson had just come out with their new field guide, the Peterson Field Guide to the Birds of Eastern North America, I think. And it was the first one of Peterson's that had the text on the left and pictures on the right. The older ones were black and white and had all of the photos in the middle. So you had to go to the pictures on page 91, and it was not as fun to use. So I got the brand new Peterson Field Guide, and we went off birding for the day. And we had just a fabulous day in the Everglades. It's all the long-legged waders, saw bald eagle, saw, I think, maybe a rail, and just got, 20 or 25 species on my list and I started making a list in our book. And Kate taught me how to record the species in the book by recording, make sure you know what county they're in, because counties are important and all this. And I'm like, wow, this is cool. And I guess it fell right into my collecting, listing, aptitude. And so I was off and flying from there. So that's how I got my start in birding. And I kind of, as is my penchant, went crazy about it, just night and day studying out every chance I got. And Kay was always a fair weather birder, on again, off again, and we were a good pair in that regard. And she taught me a lot, and I became a birder. So that's how I got started. On the other end of our relationship, I got started in podcasting. Kay passed about 7 years ago, maybe now. I was a little bit lost for what to do with my life. I'm a family doctor. I retired a few years ago, but a year or two before Kay passed, I had stopped working so much because she just needed a little more care in the last year or two, and I wanted to make those years special. And so we traveled, and we did a lot of stuff, and I barely had a practice anymore. I was in a group, and I wasn't there very much. And after she passed, I just said, I don't want to go back to work full time. And so I didn't. And yet I was birding a lot and didn't really have any direction, and said, my son and I sat down and said, Dad, you should have a podcast. I said, what is a podcast? And he said, you'd be good at it, Dad. And I listened to a couple of podcasts. I said, what should I do a podcast? He said, why don't you do a birding podcast? I said, oh, there are lots of good birding. There are 4 or 5 good birding podcasts at the time. And I said, oh, and I said, oh, what the heck? And I just started and have been going at it ever since. It's been fun.
That's amazing. When you first started the podcast, did you have any audio production experience?
No, none at all. I had done some website stuff. I was kind of the webmaster for our family practice thing, so I kind of knew how to build a website. I used WordPress. I could build a website, and that was honestly half of the battle, getting some sort of online presence. So I started a website, but no, I had no idea. But he's a lifelong learner. I just dove in and bought way too much junk. I bought it was before there were any good. Zoom didn't exist, and there was Zencaster, but it was clunky, and there were a lot of things to do, and so I just started doing almost all of mine live. I bought a little recorder and 2 or 3 sets of microphones that would plug into it, and would sit down with people and do a podcast.
Wow.
Uh, and that was great. And then shortly after that, the pandemic came, and it's hard to get together with people, and then Zoom just blew up. And I used Zencaster for a little bit, but I never really liked it. It was hard to explain to people how to use it. Well, you need a microphone, and then you need this, you need that, and it recorded on their computer, and then I had to wait for it to download to my computer, and they'd turn the computer off, and I'd lose it. It was a mess. It was way too complicated for my taste. And then Zoom became perfectly usable, and that's what I use for most of mine now.
That's amazing that you started and actually um, was recording live straight away.
Well, I mean, no, I recorded them. I didn't broadcast them live.
Oh, I see. Oh, right. So you
I recorded them in person. In person,
Oh,
I guess
okay.
is a
Okay.
better. Yeah, yeah.
Right.
No, I have not done live. I have not done live stream podcasting. That is, yeah,
Yeah.
a
No, that
level of
terrifies
a
me.
level of bravery outside my comfort zone.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm working towards it. I've done a few, but I don't do it regularly, and it is quite scary. So, whereabouts do you live now? You mentioned Maine
I
and
live
you've
in
mentioned
Tacoma,
Florida.
Washington, on the West Coast, on the upper left of the U.S., as we say.
And what kind of birds would you be seeing locally?
Well, we are in a great birding spot. I live right on the Puget Sound, which is a
Oh,
huge weaving network of salt water all around the upper northern half of the coast of Washington, from north of Seattle and the San Juan Islands and other islands and all these inlets, and most of the big ports like Tacoma are on the Puget Sound. And so we get a nice smattering of seabirds and saltwater alcids and that sort of thing, some of which are migratory and some of which are year-round. And then we have our local residents, but we have a lot of migration here, not the kind of famous migration like they have in the eastern U.S., where you get all the neotropic warblers and tanagers and vireos and everything comes streaming through in the spring and fall. But we get a nice mix of migrants here in Western Washington. And Washington is like 2 states. We have the east of the Cascades and west of the Cascades. I live west of the Cascade Mountains, and east is higher elevation. It's mostly 1,000 to 2,000 feet, and it's big open plateaus and prairies, and a lot of wheat fields and fruit orchards, but also a lot of sage and open areas, grazing farmland and stuff. So you get it's dry, have a whole different habitat there. So we have a nice state bird list, 460 or 70 birds, I think, and just in the state, and it's great birding.
what would you describe your approach to birding? You mentioned earlier that once you kind of got into it, you were really into sort of listing and
Yeah.
making notes of the birds you saw.
I laughed. I've looked at your podcast a little bit, and if you are the casual birder, I am the casual podcaster. Yeah, I am on my podcast. I have made much less effort at branding and merchandising and sponsors. I'd say my secret weapon is I need nothing. I need nothing. I don't need your money. All I need is your interest and time. Anyway, so that's my secret weapon. So I'm the casual podcaster. I'm less casual as a birder. I tend to. Uh, I would say I've evolved. When I first started, it was all about learning. I mean, I just wanted to learn about the birds, and that takes a while. uh, and especially when you've got a busy family life and a busy work life. But I spent a lot of years studying and honestly more studying than birding for a lot of my first 20 or 30 years because that's what I had time for. And listing, yeah, I started with a American Birding Association, ABA list, and then I kind of figured I'll have a Washington list and a Pierce County list and a yard list and the typical things birders do. And those have been of, you know, interest to me. I wouldn't say they're overwhelming importance, but certainly I keep my lists. And that kind of was my thing for a long time. And then the last 5 years or so, I've started traveling more. And I've done some world birding, mostly on guided trips, some on my own. And I've also just started collecting experiences, seeing new places and some of the big birding spectacles of the United States, especially, but the world are more important to me than finding a new species. So some of my things I have done and want to do, I want to see some of the seabird breeding islands. I went to Antarctica. It's cool for birding, but not a place to go to build your life list. I mean, gosh, there aren't that many birds down there, but the birds that you see are unbelievable. The penguin colonies and the albatross colonies and the seabirds just zooming around and things like that. So some of the things I want to go to the Platte River and see the sandhill cranes in migration in March some year, and I want to go to Bear Divide, I think it is in California, is a place where hundreds of thousands of migrant passerines can stream through on a perfect day in the spring, and
Wow.
just some spectacles. I want to see some of the birding spectacles more than to get one more bird on my species. Although I'll go get that bird on my species list too.
It sounds like, although you keep lists, you're not desperately going out to build this. I mean, are you birding regularly locally, or is your
Oh,
birding kind of on trips?
no, I bird every day. Uh, and I mean, every day. Essentially, bird every day. I don't get an eBird list. I've given up my list of lists. I've given up my trying to get an eBird list every single day. It just takes a little of the joy out of it. But I pretty much get out at least for a walk or something. Like before our podcast this morning, I had a delightful 20-minute stroll. There's a little park right near us, Puget Creek Natural Area, and it's about a mile and a half from here, but I was on a time thing, so I drove down instead of walking down, which I sometimes do, and just took a 20 or 25-minute stroll up, and it was perfect. It was just, it's a cool 55 degrees, and the sun was coming up. It was maybe 7:10 in the morning, and at this time of year, that the path in the Puget Creek Natural Area is very densely vegetated. I mean, the leaves are fully out, so you can't see much. You're just in a den of leaves. But I got some real treats. A Swainson's thrush, which you hear singing all the time, just came right down and lit in a branch right in front of me in the perfect light. And I'm thinking, oh, I should have brought my camera, but I've kind of stopped carrying my camera all the time these days because I find it more fun not to. And so I got great looks at that. And a red-breasted sapsucker came down and was just calling right overhead and doing this little staccato drumming, the Morse code sort of drumming they do. And then a downy woodpecker came up out of the creek and was all wet and shaking itself. I go, is this a young bird or a wet bird? I'm trying to sort that out, and I think it was just a wet bird. But it was just a beautiful little walk for just a few minutes. So I get out for just casual birding, and I chase birds, and I go on big trips, and I go birding with friends for short days and long days and overnights. I just bird a lot.
Sounds fantastic. And I loved hearing about those different birds. And one of my listeners, Kathleen, she's up in just south of Vancouver. And
Hmm.
she was telling us on we've got a community group
Hmm.
for listeners of the show. And she just posted today about having heard a Swainson's thrush singing. And I thought I really must go and listen to what that sounds like on eBird
Oh, it's
because
beautiful.
I've never seen or heard a Swainson's thrush as far as I know.
Yeah, Swainson's thrush are interesting. They're a late arriver here, so they come in late. Probably start hearing them the first week of May if you're lucky. Second week of May is more common, but by now they're singing. So they show up maybe 2 weeks before, and they have this little whistle call, and you know they're there, but you can't see them. I mean, they're just secretive. And so you rarely see them. And now they've got this ethereal song. Anyway, the beautiful song. And they're one of the cool birds, and I got beautiful looks at that. And red-breasted sapsuckers, you should check that out. They are spectacular.
I'm just trying to remember if I've ever seen a red-breasted sapsucker. I know that I've seen flickers,
Uh-huh. Northern flickers, yeah.
and the sapsuckers are a little like woodpeckers, are they?
They are a type of woodpecker. They drill little sap holes in trees that the bugs stick in, and they go back and get them. So you see trees with rings of holes around the tree. I don't know if you have any sapsuckers
No,
in
we don't.
Europe.
And I remember
Yeah,
now that I have seen a yellow-bellied
probably
sapsucker.
yellow-bellied sapsucker, the East
Because,
Coast one.
yes, because I always felt it almost feels like a name you would call someone, you
Yeah,
yellow-bellied sapsucker. And
exactly.
yeah, so I haven't seen red-breasted, so that's going to have to go on my list of birds
Yeah,
to
we
see.
have three sapsuckers in Washington. Four, we get yellow-bellied rarely, but we have red-breasted sapsuckers, and we have red-naped sapsuckers on the east side of the mountains, and then we have Williamson sapsucker, which are tend to be high elevation specialists. So,
Oh, wow.
uh, yeah, so we're sapsucker heaven here.
Fantastic. So you started your show, and you knew you wanted to do it about birding. Did you have a structure in mind or a theme in mind or how it was you were going to approach it? Or was it going to be always interviews? How did your show evolve?
Yeah, my thesis for the show was that birders are kind of interesting people. And I joke that as a family doctor, I had license to ask people lots of things you couldn't ask anybody else. Well, as a birding podcaster, I have license to ask people questions and learn about them and probe and pry and learn their life secrets, birding life secrets, at least they'll tell me what they want to say. So I use some of my family doctor interviewing skills, so to speak, to just try to learn about people and what makes them birders. And so my underlying thing is I like to talk to birders about birding. And I like to hear their birding stories about where they've been, what they do. I like to learn what makes them tick as a birder. I have birders who are passionate conservationists. Others are listers. I talked to Peter Kastner, I mean, the lister in the whole world on the podcast. And I have, people who just like to bird for travel. That's all they do. They just go on trips. They hardly get their pins out when they're at home. And then I have literally backyard birders who just they pretty much haven't birded more than 30 miles from home. And so there's lots of ways to be a birder and lots of ways to love this passion we have. So yeah, I try to hear about it. That's my premise. I want to get to know people and have fun and hear their stories because I don't know if you've taken car trips with birders, but I mean the stories are great. I mean you hear oh yeah we were always talking about oh we went there. Did you go there? Did you hear this? Did you chase that bird? The stories are good, and then the stories that we won't talk about on the podcast, the gossip.
We recently watched The Big Year again. It's one of those films that every now and then we have an itch to watch.
Hmm.
And the birding in that is quite different from the birding that I've experienced. Really sort of chasing around, but it seems like there's a real mix of camaraderie and competition there. Is that true to life?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. In Pierce County, I live in Pierce County, Washington. We have a group of birders. And probably it's really bigger. I mean, it used to be 8 years ago, used to be that there were probably 6 or 8 pretty avid birders in the county. And there are at least 30 now. And the whole information age has democratized birding. I mean, it used to be, when I started birding, you had to earn your way onto phone lists. You didn't just get to be on the phone tree, the rearbird phone tree. Rearbird shows up, well, John will call Jack, Jill, and Jenny, and they will call 3 or 4 other people, and 10 minutes later, the whole community, whole state knows about these birds. But you didn't just say, hey, I want to be on the list. Can I be in the fourth ring of the tree? No, no, it didn't work that way. You had to kind of be invited into the community. Well, now with eBird and the chats we use WhatsApp. A lot of people use Discord, but we haven't quite graduated to Discord yet in our area. We use a WhatsApp group, and we have two. We have the Pierce County Rearbird WhatsApp list, which is rearbirds only. If you post any, just casual banter on that, the moderator will say, this is better in the Pierce County Bird discussion group. We have the Pierce County Bird Discussion Group where you can say, hey, I'm going to go to such and such a place. What's the best place to park? Gosh, I was hassled by the police when I went there last time. Was any issue? Is that landowner with the dog a real problem? Whatever, that sort of thing. Or just, gossip and banter and all sorts of crap on that list. But the rare bird alert is when that goes off, to say, ooh, should I go this time? So it's very, very much an open sharing community, but we all know whether we're first or seventh in the county for the year.
Right, right. Yes, I've only recently become aware of WhatsApp groups for birders. We have something called the Lady Birders. So I'm part of the Hampshire Ornithological Society, a member of
Hmm.
that. And a couple of years ago, one of the members, Janice, decided to start a group just for women
Hmm.
birders because it can be quite daunting to go out birding on your own. And some people, haven't got people to go birding with.
Right.
Or when they have been birding in groups, they felt a bit overshadowed by the more keen birders. And
Yeah.
so this group was started to be a sort of information sharing, and they set up trips so you can go out
Hmm.
walking together. And it's been amazing because we've heard so much more about the birds in our county than we had previously. And we can look on eBird and see what birds are around, but that's kind of like just picking and choosing what bird could we find about. But to have someone's actual experience, oh, we were at such and such place today and we saw this, and look at this photo I took, or, it's quite
Yeah.
inspiring. So that's been brilliant having that. And I understand what you're saying about the democratization of birding. Nothing takes away from the actual experience and learning, but you can find about so many different birds. You don't have to just look in a guidebook anymore. You can actually be online and hear what the bird sounds like, see some of the habitat it might be in. It's wonderful. I was going to say, I know that you went to Antarctica, and I think you went the same year that we did, because I know that there was a big birding group that went there about a month before we went. But I only found out about it when we came back.
Hmm.
And I heard a few different podcasts, because I think there's quite a few podcasters had been on that trip,
For
and they were
sure.
talking about that there was a WhatsApp group actually on the trip, so you could let each other know, because that's one of the things I didn't know about when we went on our trip. It wasn't a bird oriented trip, but there were birders on there.
Hmm.
And that would have been so helpful, because we did have people who were up on deck virtually the whole time and experienced birders, so they would have been able to say, oh, we've just seen such and such, or get up here, there's a particular whale or something. But we didn't have any of that, so we missed quite a lot. And when I got back and heard all the podcasts saying, oh, we've just come back from Antarctica and we had this experience and that experience, and we were all sharing all our knowledge, and I was like, oh, I wanted to have been on that kind of trip.
It was a great trip. The eighth put it together, and Alvaro Jaramillo, who's a big California, now just moved back to Ontario birder, and George Armistead, who's a big East Coast birder, has his own tour company, and a bunch of guides from Rock Jumper, a South African company, were all on the boat. So there were just great guides, and probably another 30 or 40 really good birders. Uh, so you didn't have to really rely just on the guides. And there was a group of what we jokingly call the Brits. They weren't all British. I think they're all European. There was a Swedish guy, and anyway, probably about seven or eight, yeah, something like that. All men, 40 to 70, probably 35 to 70, and all extraordinary birders, just extraordinary, and had energy like nobody's business. I mean, you know, I had trouble sleeping on the boat. It's rocking and rolling, and you go to bed, and it's down there. Days were long, but not that long. And I'd wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'd say, "Oh God, it's just getting daylight." And I say, "Oh, I guess I'll just go up for a walk." I go up. Those Brits are out there, and all over it. And you always knew where the best place in the boat to be was, because it's wherever the Brits were. Because they would be there first and stake out the best place in the boat. And I remember waking up one morning and it had snowed that night. Really, the only snow we had on the trip. So it's just like 6 inches of snow all over the boat. And there's one part of the boat that's kind of sheltered from the wind and it's undercover. and it was the only really good place. And of course, all the Brits are kind of coved in there, and I snuggle in with all the Brits there, and got two or three birds that the only time I got on the whole trip were that morning between 4 and 6 when the Brits pointed them out to me. So they were just really good birders
I bet the
cruises.
stories over meals were just amazing.
They
And all
were
those times between birds appearing.
exactly.
Because,
Yeah,
it's not like it's a
yeah,
constant stream of birds, is it? If you're
yeah,
near land, you see a lot more. But when you're out to sea, yes, you've got some birds that will follow the boat. Oh, sorry,
yeah,
ship, I should say.
yeah.
Once you've seen those, it's making sure you're keeping a lookout towards the horizon for,
Or
an
something different.
albatross that might come past that you hadn't yet seen. I didn't realize there were so many species of albatross as well.
There are.
Oh, yeah, I
Yeah.
could talk about the Antarctic trip forever. So, what other countries have you been to?
One thing I want to go birding on every continent. Uh, and I've got 6 continents down. Australia is the only one left. But I have traveled probably just in the last 8 years. Kay and I took our first big international trip, my first big international trip birding to Kenya. And it kind of hooked me on international birding. It was such a fabulous trip. So I've been to Kenya and I've been to Morocco. And I've been to several places in Latin America. I have 2 children who live in Costa Rica, so I've been to Costa Rica a lot. I've been to Colombia. I've been to Ushuaia in Antarctica and Mexico. Yeah,
Have you been over to
Hawaii.
Europe as well?
Hey, I have been, casually in Europe. I haven't birded Europe per se, but I've traveled to Europe, but for a number of, more vacations. And Kay and I would do a little bit of birding. And I've been to Asia just briefly. I spent a few days in Thailand and a few days in Cambodia with my son, and I did just a little bit of birding on those trips. So I haven't done a lot in Asia either.
You must listen to Kirsty's podcast, The Weekend Birder. She is an Australian birder. We met her when we were out in Australia just recently, and I highly recommend her show. She does interviews with all types of birders, and she also focuses in on particular aspects of birding as well. So, how birds fly, or, something particular about bird physiology, and she's very warm. She's got a lovely personality, and I highly recommend you listen. It would be a great way for you to sort of learn about the birds that are there and actually hear, the excitement in the voices of the people that talk about the birds. Honestly, after going to Australia, we did our own kind of tour. We hired guides a couple of times, but we were pretty much doing it our own way. But we did meet up with Kirsty, and she gave us some great tips for the end of our holiday, which worked out really well. But now when I listen back to her show, I realise how much we missed, and I was like, I've got to go back there. There's so much to see. But I highly recommend her show. It's a great taste of Australian birds.
Sounds great. I'll have to check it out. That's
Yeah.
good. That's good. Have you listened to The Science of Birds from Oregon?
Yeah. Is it Ivan?
Yes, Ivan is his name.
Yeah.
Quite talented.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I have to say, when I started my show, I was quite in awe of the people that already had the shows out there. People like The Science of Birds and the ABA podcasts. I did kind of wonder where my voice would come in all of that, because I'm not an expert. I don't have any degrees in ornithology. I'm literally someone who enjoys being out with birds and wants to share the joy that I feel with others. But it doesn't come from a scientific side. I figured that, I would interview people that had that knowledge and that experience, and that would be how I could share that. And I would learn from them as well as my audience. Yeah, there's some fantastic podcasts out there about birds, and something for every taste, I think, as well. Sometimes people want very serious, knowledge heavy shows, and some
Hmm.
people like very irreverent, very fun shows. I'm definitely not a fun show. I have fun, but I feel like I want to give birds the respect that they're due. So I tend to be more respectful of nature than some of the shows. But that doesn't mean we don't have fun, and there's lots of laughs and smiles in my show. But I hope that I've sort of carved out a little niche, because I do listen to the other podcasts, and there's such an amazing amount of quality out there. And it sometimes can make you feel a little bit overawed about, oh, is anyone going to listen to me when they've got all these other wonderful ones to listen to?
I have to say my attitude is that if I'm having fun, that's all I care about. And if people want to listen, they're welcome to listen. And if they don't want to listen, there are plenty of other good choices, and I don't really care.
I have to say, with the amount of work that goes into making an episode as well, it's far much more work than I ever dreamed when I started the show. You wouldn't be able to put in all that effort if you didn't enjoy what you were doing. Is that something that you found as well?
Yeah, to some degree, I'd say that for a typical, let's say I do an hour-long show, I would take it takes an hour to record it, takes an hour and a half to edit it, maybe. Have to listen to the whole thing and make a few little changes, but I've given up trying to make them perfect. It probably takes another hour to, put it together, put it up on, Podbean, which is the place I post my shows to, write a little blog post about it, write the show notes, come up with a thumbnail. So probably 3 hours. I don't think of it as a vast amount of work. For me, the breakthrough, if there was one, was that I just am not going to have a schedule to put shows up. I started out I'm going to have a show every week, and that became way too much. I said I'll have a show every 2 weeks, and that was fine, except I'd start to feel pressure at the end of the 2 weeks. And now I say, I can have a show whenever I have a good show.
I like the style of that.
And so my goal is to put up 2 episodes a month. But if it's 2.5 or 3 weeks, that's okay. And if there's something that needs to go up timely and it's only been 3 or 4 days, that's okay too.
Brilliant. Yeah, I do like that. Yeah, I started off weekly, and then I found that a few times I've ended up with big gaps because we've been spending, especially this time of year when we're going out virtually every weekend birding, and
Mhm.
doesn't really leave a great deal of time to produce the show. So yeah, I'll have to take that on board, what you've said there, and have a think about
No,
that.
you don't have to take anything on
No,
board.
because I like
Do
the
it your
style
way.
of it. I like the style of it. Not to feel the pressure of trying to get something out and then missing weeks and feeling bad that
Yeah.
you've missed weeks. And
Yeah. I
yeah.
took a I took a holiday from the show. Both my children had babies. My first two grandchildren were born the
Oh,
end of last year.
congratulations.
And so I took 3 months and went to Costa Rica to be with both of my kids when they had their babies. And I said, I'm not going to try to put podcasts up while I'm doing this. That would be ridiculous. And so I just took a 3 month break and then I came back and I felt better than ever. So it was good.
Are your children into birding as well?
Not really. Uh, my daughter is into permaculture and nature and conservation sort of things. My son knows a lot about birds that he doesn't know he knows. He grew up the son of an avid birder. So I'd say, did you see that? I said, yeah, it's just a red-tailed. Just a red-tailed hawk, Dad. You don't have to stop.
Amazing. And living
Yeah.
somewhere that's so bird famous, it's one
Yeah.
of the destinations that birders do. So, what would you say brings you joy when you're birding?
I would say that I'd have to have a list. I can't say one thing brings me joy. I love just getting out. I like going birding alone, just going out, seeing and smelling and hearing what I hear and see. I love going birding with friends. Some of my best friends are birders, and we just have a great time together. I like the thrill of the chase. He, boy, Bruce, like, Ed, there's a new bird at such and such place. You want to go? I say, yeah, we'll meet in 10 minutes. Let's go. And that's fun. And I like going to new places. I like traveling for birding. So I think the whole thing is, if as long as I keep my attitude good, it's all great.
That's wonderful to hear. Um, when you're out birding, are there any particular aspects of it that you enjoy? Is it like just the whole thing, or do you like seeing the colours? Do you like seeing birds fly? Do you like listening to the song?
I think a little bit of it is the Where's Waldo part of it. You know, uh, looking at a flock of shorebirds. There's 2,000 shorebirds on a mudflat, and trying to pick the red knot out of all of the Dunlin and Western sandpipers is fun. Uh, I like the puzzle of identification, all of those gulls sitting there. That's a second year glaucous winged gull, and is that a Western or is that a hybrid? And I like the identification struggle. I like the birding by ear. I have always had pretty good hearing, although in the last couple of years, maybe not as good as it used to be. But I like learning bird songs and hearing birds. So, just the whole experience, I guess.
If you were giving some advice to a brand new birder, how would you encourage them to go out birding?
I would say join the community. A lot of young or people who don't know the bird think I have to be the only person who's interested in bird watching. I mean, it's such be a proud birder, join the group, uh, you know, experience the whole community. Uh, I would say buy the best pair of binoculars you can afford. I mean, I struggled way too many years with cheap bins, and once you've had good bins, you don't ever want to go birding with a lousy pair of binoculars again. Uh, and don't get hung up on the things you don't know. Enjoy it. You learn. It's a lifelong learning thing. You always can get better. There's always something more to learn, and so take it as a just have fun.
I like the way that you encourage people to get out and get to know the community as well, because it can feel quite lonely, and sometimes you can feel like people are being a bit gatekeeperish about, you don't know enough, so you can't really be a birder. But as you said, it is
Do
a
you still
lifelong learning
experience
thing.
that?
Yeah, it does happen occasionally.
My experience, my limited experience, was the only place I've ever experienced that was in Britain.
Isn't that
Out there.
interesting?
Yeah, I remember going to a blind at some preserve, and where there's like 8 people all lined up, all looking through their scopes, all looking real somber and serious. And Kay was with me, and and she said, "Can you take a look at this and tell me if this is a curlew sandpiper?" And the guy looked at her like, "Who the hell are you and why are you talking in my blind?" I just looked right back. I'm like, "Really? Lighten up, buddy." Because that would be every every other place in the world I've ever been. That would be they'd say, "Sure, let me help you." Yeah. "Oh, no, take a look at this." Not there. It was like, "We are serious birders and don't even whisper in this blind." It's like, really? Lighten up, buddy. Anyway,
Oh,
that
that's
that was
really
the
interesting.
only place I've ever experienced that. That was a
No,
long
no,
time ago, so it may
yeah,
may not be like that anymore, but it was
no.
weird.
Yeah, we've definitely experienced that kind of attitude, and not that long ago. One of my best experiences recently, though, was we had a rare bird that was found locally. Well, actually, in one of the reserves that's down on the coast. Everyone turned up to go and see it. It was a Hudsonian godwit, so you're probably quite familiar with that.
Hmm.
But it's unusual for one to be here, although I did hear later that there had been one in Wales last year, so it's possibly it was the same bird and it's just been here all the time
Hmm.
because it looked in good condition. But there was such a buzz in the hides around this lake.
Hmm.
Everyone was being so helpful and letting people look through scopes and pointing it out and telling exactly where it was. And I thought that's how it should be, that people, because you'd get people that didn't even know there was a rare bird there that just turned up, and they could immediately feel part of it. It wasn't like, oh, we're all looking at this bird and you can't, because you don't even know what it is, you're not going to see it. But no, there's still definitely a little bit of whether it's people don't like talking to other people, they're not as outgoing, I don't know. But sometimes you get that vibe when you go into a hide, and it's just, mind you, I just go in now and talk to people and just try and break those barriers down.
Yeah, good. You go, girl. You go. My Hudsonia Godwit experience. I'm a brand new birder. Kay and I went to Jamaica Bay, which is right near JFK Airport in New
Yeah.
York City. When I started birding, I was in the Army. I was stationed at West Point, New York, and we were birding at Jamaica Bay. And we had our, Bushnell 735 bins as our optics, and we're walking around, and we had just gotten there, and we're walking down this grassy path, and there's a big mud flat, and there's some birds out there. We're looking, and there are just little specks of shorebirds. We can't see anything. And this nice guy said, "Would you like to see a Hudsonian Godwit?" And I said, "Sure." And he has a spotting scope up, and we look at it, and I go, "Oh my goodness." That I was like, and those in those days, those were a $200 spotting scope. They were nothing. I mean, this was 40 years ago, so $200 was not nothing, but it was not, you know, life-changing money or anything. And I looked at the scope, and Ken and I walked away. I said, "Kay, I want one of those." Uh, and so we finished birding at Jamaica Bay, and we drove straight to 42nd Street Photo in Manhattan and bought a Bushnell's
Oh,
space
wow.
scope just exactly like the guy had in a tripod, and went home.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, I mean, it does change things. I mean, I do say on my website, you know, you don't have to have binoculars, you don't have to have a scope to go out and enjoy birds. But it is true that in certain habitats, having binoculars and having scopes, especially when you're looking at shorebirds or waders,
Hmm.
birds that are further out and you're not going to be seeing close up, it really enhances it. It was only a couple of years ago that I ever used a scope for the first time. We had one quite some time ago, but I never got on with it, so we never took it out with us. It just sat there gathering dust. And then we went on a actually it was a holiday that we took because we were due to go to Antarctica, and because of COVID breaking, the holiday was cancelled, but we still had booked all the leave to take off. So we
Hmm.
went on a guided trip in Scotland, and the guide had a scope. And the ease and how quickly he could set it up and how quickly he could make sure you were on the bird, and how it brought all those birds, you know, you could focus on an individual bird in amongst the flocks and flocks of birds that you were seeing.
An individual feather on an individual
Well,
bird.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. But it really gave me a whole new perspective, quite literally, on being able to identify birds or even just appreciate birds within a flock, you know, being able to look at just one. Because when I was finding it quite overwhelming, whenever you look out and there's a flock of birds, it's quite hard to just get yourself to look at one. I end up seeing the whole and
Hmm.
then not taking in. Yes, you can take in the dynamics of the whole of all the birds, but it's not as rewarding as watching one individual bird who's preening or looking for food. And having the scope gives you that personal touch to those birds that are further away. So I do advocate for them now.
My observation has been with bins, they've always been really good binoculars, but the really good binoculars became expensive, but not like, take a mortgage on your house expensive 20 or 25 years ago, something like that. But now you can get really quite good binoculars for three or $400 US. I mean, these are good binoculars. And they just didn't exist 15, 20, 25 years ago. Those were top end, several $1,000 binoculars. And there's a difference. The really nice ones are better, but they're not that much better.
And the other really good thing about them is how lightweight they've become. So they're good and
Hmm.
lightweight, because I remember, you know, having the bigger binoculars when I was younger, and you know, you would not want to be out for long with one of those around your neck. And
Hmm.
so having a lightweight pair of binoculars that's also good quality just makes a birding day like a dream.
It's great.
Well, I realise that we are almost at the end of our time together. I would just like to ask you, if you had a fantasy birding day, so you could bird any time period, anywhere in the world, but it's a day just for you to go out and see birds, where would you go? What would you do?
Okay, right now, I would probably go to Newfoundland, to St. John's, and I would probably spend part of the day, and it'd probably be early June, and part of the day in the boreal forest, just seeing all of the breeding New World wood warblers, just all of the, you know, you could probably get 15 species of wood warblers and a couple of three tanagers and maybe a grosbeak and some buntings and just a fabulous show of that. And the other half of the day, I would go on a little boat ride out to the breeding bird islands and see the colonies of northern gannets and Atlantic puffins and razorbills and dovekies and all of the seabirds and kittiwakes and the whole massive seabird colonies. So just off the top of my head, that's where I go.
That sounds pretty perfect.
Well,
That is one of the places on our bucket list to go. And we've been to Nova Scotia quite a few times, but we've never made it out to Newfoundland. And that's definitely, you know, one of the birding places we want to go. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences and your thoughts with us, Ed. Where can people find your show?
my pleasure, Susie. Thanks for doing this with me. I am the Bird Banter Podcast, and birdbanter.com is my website. I put up a blog post for every episode that I do, and so you can literally hear them there or just subscribe on whatever your favorite podcasting thing is. Pretty easy.
Thanks so much for joining me today, and really enjoyed speaking with you.
My pleasure. Thank you, Susie. Bye bye.